World Economic Forum live simulations, dead honeybee colonies, the de-extinction of dire wolves, Trump insider trading, measles in Texas, and the helicopter crash in New York. Follow me down the rabbit hole about current events. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about current events. This was not requested by any of you. I know that this is like the time that I would say, oh, thank you to whoever. Thank you to whoever sent me videos into my messages on Instagram. Because you guys send me videos all the time, I take those videos. I'm like, you know what? I'm getting a lot of current event videos, so I need to do an episode on that. So it seems like that just runs in cycles. So here we are, doing current events. And thank you to all of you guys that suggested current events on my Instagram question. I had 3 of them. So I had, the World Economic Forum, the honeybees, and the dire wolves. But I was like, I need a couple more. You guys requested these other couple things. I threw them in there. It actually makes total sense. I don't know why I didn't think about them, but I appreciate you guys. Thanks. So let's start with the World Economic Forum live simulation because this is odd. It's odd for sure. On October 18th, 2019, Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted a high-level simulation exercise for pandemic preparedness and response. Yes, in October of 2019. This event was hosted in New York City, and it brought together business, government, security, and public health leaders to address this hypothetical global pandemic scenario. During the scenario, they discussed different high-level policy choices that could arise in the midst of a severe pandemic. The reasoning behind this scenario was that the world had seen a number of epidemics in the years leading up to this scenario. These epidemics included Ebola, Zika, MERS, and SARS. In the news release put out by the World Economic Forum, it stated, quote, "Experts suggest there's a growing likelihood of one of these events becoming a global threat or an Event 201 pandemic that would pose disruptions to health and society and cause average annual economic losses of 0.7% global GDP, similar in scale to climate change." An epidemic is described as an unexpected increase in the number of disease cases in a specific geographical area. A pandemic is declared when a disease grows at an exponential rate. As we all know, COVID-19 was discovered in Wuhan, China in late 2019. The CDC alerted the nation of the outbreak abroad in January 2020, with the first U.S. case reported in Washington state in late January. By March 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global health emergency, and that same month, it was declared a pandemic. I know you're thinking, Danny, COVID is over, so is this like a COVID episode? What's going on here? No, it's not. Nothing to do with COVID, kind of. The World Economic Forum put out another news release about a catastrophic cyberattack. This was released in January 2023, but indicated that the attack was likely to happen in the next 2 years. They stated that geopolitical instability is exacerbating the risk of catastrophic cyber attacks. This event would take down the power grid. Everything basically would be down, so like your internet, electricity, everything. And so all the people in the hospitals that are relying on machines to keep them alive or whatever, those would all be off. Your refrigerators, your heaters, your air conditioners, whatever you would need, none of that would work. So all the food that you're keeping cool, gone. If it's too cold outside, now you're going to freeze to death because your heater isn't working. If it's too hot outside, now you're going to be hot inside. That's going to lead to a lot more heat exhaustion and heat strokes and different things like that, and heat-related deaths. So they got together with different executives in the cybersecurity space to prepare for an event like this. Oddly enough, a prominent cybersecurity professor from Indiana University has gone missing very recently. Over the month of March, Professor Wang's email account, phone number, and professor profile has been removed by the university. On March 28th, 2025, the FBI raided his home in Bloomington, Indiana, and in Carmel, Indiana. On March 31st, he was fired without due process from the university. The strangest part is no one knows where the professor and his wife are, or why the FBI is investigating them to begin with. This professor has spent 20 years publishing academic papers on cryptography, privacy, and cybersecurity. One might say that he is an expert in the field. He was the Associate Dean for Research at Indiana University's Luddy School for Informatics, Computing, and Engineering. He has been the recipient of nearly $23 million in grants over his 21 years at the university, and he is just gone. The FBI didn't find him when they raided his house. Nobody's heard from him. He's just gone. This guy knows so much about cybersecurity that he would be able to point out issues or a cyber attack if one were coming. But Xiaofeng Wang was from China. And we know that China has been planting professors in U.S. universities to teach our people basically like false information, not necessarily false information, but kind of like skew their views on different things. So is this why the FBI was raiding his house? Like, did they find out that he was actually doing something to our power grid? Or was he sending information back to China? Is that why he was like quietly taken down from the university website and just like fired out of nowhere? Or would he be able to stop a cyber attack if one was coming? Like, are they planning something? Is that why they disappeared him? Are we in China right now? Are we just disappearing people like that? This is crazy. And all of this combined with the fact that Leave the World Behind was like a cyber attack, and you have 0 Day, which is a cyber attack. Both these things came out on Netflix. You're talking about these weird cyber attacks that are happening. Now you got the World Economic Forum, who properly prepared us for the pandemic by doing a pandemic exercise just months before a freaking pandemic. And they're saying, whoa, there's going to be a pretty severe cyber attack. And the fact that our power grid is so susceptible to attack. Like, it is not very secure at all. Anybody could just come in and do whatever. And most of the stuff that we get for our power grid actually comes from China. So they could be planting something in the power grid, like where they could just click a couple buttons and boom, it shuts off. I mean, I'm no like computer expert. I don't know how they could do it, but I know it's for sure possible. Is something coming? Should we be preparing? This is like the time in the episode where I tell you to become a doomsday prepper and make sure you have like light sources and extra candles and extra food and freeze-dried food. That way you can feed your family and maybe like move to a homestead and start a garden and a farm and all those things. That's me. Like I'll do those things. You do you, man. I'm just saying that the World Economic Forum knows what's coming, as we've seen with so many things by them, and they're so corrupt. And they're working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That's sketchy to me as well. So I'm just wondering if maybe we all should do a little bit of prepping. I don't know. You do you. I'm just here to give you the information. If you move to a farm and start a garden and have cows and pigs and chickens and whatever, well, that's on you. We have more current events to get to because the honeybees are dying. And the honeybees have been dying for a while. But honeybee colonies in the US are dying at rates we have never seen before. So the colonies are projected to decline up to 70% in 2025. We've already seen 1.6 million colonies destroyed from honeybee die-off this year. The losses are valued at around $643 million. In February 2025, the American Beekeeping Federation and the American Honey Producers Association came together and wrote a letter to the Department of Agriculture stating that these are record losses and that 70 to 100% of bees have been lost in the last 12 months. In the letter, they demanded some sort of aid and funding to bounce back from this catastrophic loss of honeybees. However, the USDA is experiencing government cuts, as with everybody, so the University of Cornell is getting involved to help with the research as to why this is happening and what we can do to prevent it from happening again, or at all, hopefully. But honeybees aren't originally native to the US. Like, they were brought to North America in 1622. But since then, they've become a vital part of our agricultural system. They help to pollinate half of all crops, including apples, berries, pumpkins, melons, and cherries. Honeybee decline has been on the rise for decades now. We used to see a decline in honeybees over the winter months of about 10 to 20%. So we would see it die off because it's winter. Some would die. In the last 10 years, we've seen winter declines of up to 40 to 50%, but this past winter, we're seeing a 70% decline. Without honeybees, we would probably still live, but our food supply would take a massive hit. The varieties of foods available would diminish, and the cost of certain products would skyrocket. Because we can all afford groceries now, so let's kill off the honeybees so we have to pay even more. According to the California Almond Board, without bees, almonds wouldn't exist. Coffee would still be around, but the quantity would be much less. So we'd be paying outrageous for coffee, which I just don't know if I could survive. But then you ask the question, why is this happening? Of course, right away, climate change was considered to be one of the biggest factors to the deaths of honeybees. But now they're also saying that it could be because of the pesticides used on the food. Imagine that. The bees would be right in the pesticides because they land on the plants and because they're pollinators. That mixed with the neonicotinoids is probably a deadly combination for these honeybees. Neonicotinoids, or neonics for short, are a class of synthetic neurotoxin insecticides that are used on agricultural crops. They are the single most popular insecticide class in the US. It could have something to do with the chemicals used for mite treatments in the bees. Bees get these mites, they're called varroa mites, which grow in the honeybee colonies with the bees. Right now, the only way to treat for these mites is a chemical. We don't really have an organic option. Hopefully in the future, they will discover a more natural organic option for treating these mites. But right now, the only way to do it is a chemical. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. They are making us sick with our food. And the bees are a sign that we are all going to get sick. And yes, the human population would continue. But the fact is, the food would be really expensive. So people would die from... we already have food deserts in the US, let alone around the world. We would have more food deserts because we'd have less food available. Now we're going to have food scarcity. Now food is going to skyrocket. We're going to have less money to be able to buy as much food. This could be a really serious issue for the US if we don't get it under control. But let's move on. We have all seen Jurassic Park. When scientists start messing with DNA that's extinct, it doesn't typically end well. But no one learns. Just like with Terminator and AI, everyone's oh, it's fine. So anyway, on April 7th, Colossal Biosciences announced the world's first de-extinction. They birthed 3 dire wolves. Dire wolves are wolves that lived during the Ice Age. These wolves were huge. They averaged 130 to 200 pounds and were about 5 feet long from nose to tail. The average shoulder height was around 3.2 feet. And for comparison, the modern gray wolves have an average shoulder height of 26 to 32 inches. Just like in Jurassic Park, the company didn't create the animals from a fully reconstructed dire wolf genome. They relied on genetics from the gray wolf and made some changes based on ancient DNA recovered from 2 dire wolf specimens. Because of this, many scientists are actually saying the dire wolf isn't back because it isn't genetically identical to a dire wolf. But this dire wolf, gray wolf crossbreed thing gives the wolf the core attributes they were looking for, which is size, body type, and face shape. But chickens are said to be descendants of T-Rexes. So are they going to make a chicken T-Rex crossbreed next? But the dire wolf isn't the only thing that Colossal Biosciences has created. Just last month, they announced the creation of transgenic mice. They are called woolly mice because they have these long, luscious golden locks inspired by the coats of woolly mammoths. Yep, they're making woolly mice. Transgenic mice are not new. They are mice that have had their genomes altered through genetic engineering. But what was different about this is that it was the first time to engineer 8 edits across 7 genes, and to do so simultaneously in one animal. The researchers also note that across 3 experiments, each of which used different combinations of edits, the method worked with high efficiency, resulting in living animals that presented the traits they were bred for. This just poses a lot of questions as to like what they're going to do next. Are they going to try to completely recreate this dire wolf genome? Are we going to have Jurassic Park and go see dinosaurs? As much as my son thinks that he wants to see a real live dinosaur, I don't. And I think that we should really pump the brakes on these things. I feel like we've got Jurassic Park, we've got Terminator, we've got all kinds of weird movies, we leave the world behind, all kinds of things happening in real life, and we need to chill the fuck out. Speaking of chilling out, is President Trump manipulating the stock market for personal gain for him and his friends? So Donald Trump has been adamant about implementing tariffs in our country, like on goods coming in. Tariffs are taxes charged on goods brought from other countries to our country. On April 2nd, he announced a 10% baseline tax on imports from all countries. But there were higher rates for dozens of nations that run trade surpluses with the US. This included a 34% tax on imports from China, a 20% tax on imports from the EU, 25% on South Korea, 24% on Japan, and 32% on Taiwan. However, earlier this year, he already put a 20% tax on all Chinese imports. The 10% minimum tariffs took effect on April 5th, and the higher percentages took effect April 9th. The tariffs stoke fears that a full-blown trade war could severely hurt global economic growth, among other things, because people are freaking out about these tariffs. The announcement of these tariffs caused a huge drop in the stock market. On April 4th, the S&P crashed 5.97%, Dow Jones ended with a loss of 5.5%, and NASDAQ plunged 5.73%. And that's where it sat all weekend. When it opened on April 7th, it wasn't any better. Dow Jones futures was down over 2%. And it wasn't just here in the US. In Asia, Nikkei crashed 7% and Hang Seng crashed over 9% during the session on April 7th. Thus, the S&P 500 saw the biggest weekly drop since March 2020, and the NASDAQ composite crashed more than 20% from its record high last December. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has suffered losses of over 10% from its December record high. Just after midnight on April 9th, the reciprocal tariffs, which were the higher rates, went into effect. And then, just hours later, Trump's administration said it will suspend most of these higher rates for 90 days. They would maintain the 10%, though. That is, on everyone except for China. So, he had already raised tariffs on China. He then raised the tariffs to 125%, but because he already had that 20% on them, it was actually 145% tariff on Chinese goods coming in, which we get most of our stuff from China. So, of course, this made China want to retaliate, and they started an import tax on American goods to 84%. However, just before the administration suspended the tariffs, Trump stated that it would be a great time to buy. Kind of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Now's the time, right now. Go, go, go. Because he referenced his own media company, DJT, in this open letter that he was like, hey guys, everyone buy right now. And just minutes later, stocks exploded upwards, closing the day with an increase of 9.52%. So anyway, this is leading people to accuse Trump of insider trading. An investigation has actually begun into this accusation. What is insider trading? Basically making moves in the stock market based on information that is not public knowledge. Like, if the president knows he is going to do something, like implement tariffs or suspend them, and knows that it's going to have an effect on the stock market, like we just saw, And they make moves based on that information and profit from it. That's insider trading. Charles Schwab made over $2 billion in his net worth from this market crash and then rise up again. It's been a very volatile market since the end of March. So if you're in the stock market right now, just hold on for dear life. But the question is, did Trump do this on purpose? Did he announce the tariffs knowing he was going to suspend them just a few days later? I don't like to get too political, even though I feel like I get political every single week. But I think both sides are corrupt, so that's why I'm they both suck. But we know that Nancy Pelosi is known for doing things like this, for insider trading. It's widely accepted that that's how she got as rich as she is. But that doesn't make it okay. Just because the Democrats jump off a bridge doesn't mean the Republicans should do it. No, nobody should be doing any of this. We should stop all of this. I think that they have way too much power. We need to chill out. Everyone needs to calm down. All of government, we need to take their power a little bit and be like, you guys need to check yourself. Last time I checked, you work for me. So, you're not getting rich on the back of the Americans that are going to be spending more money because of these tariffs. And it's not just us. The whole world is going to be affected by this, or is being affected by this. And that brings us to our next story about the measles outbreak in Texas. So the Texas Department of State Health Services is reporting an outbreak of measles primarily in West Texas. 561 cases have been confirmed since late January. 58% of the patients have been hospitalized. Not all at the same time over the span. Not everybody is hospitalized right this second. They clarified that in several articles where they're not all 58% are hospitalized now, but over the span of the time of this outbreak, 58% of patients that got measles were hospitalized for it. And there were 2 deaths that were measles related. And I put that in quotes because we're going to get into one of those deaths in just a minute. According to the World Health Organization, measles is a highly contagious disease caused by a virus. It spreads when an infected person breathes, coughs, or sneezes. It is more common in children, but can affect anyone and everyone. Symptoms of measles usually begin 10 to 15 days after exposure, with the rash being the most visible symptom. Early symptoms include running nose, cough, and red watery eyes along with the rash. But measles can cause death. Most deaths are from complications related to the disease. And these include blindness, encephalitis, which is an infection causing brain swelling and potentially brain damage, severe diarrhea and dehydration, ear infections, and severe breathing problems, including pneumonia. A mother of the first child that died of measles spoke out on social media. So she actually took her child into the hospital due to pneumonia and RSV, not measles. The hospital then gave the child the MMR vaccination because they were not vaccinated against it. The MMR vaccination is measles, mumps, and rubella. This vaccine is a 2-part vaccine, and it has live weakened viruses as the antigen. According to the Cleveland Clinic website, on the MMR vaccine, under who shouldn't get the MMR vaccine, it states a weakened immune system, among other reasons why you shouldn't get the vaccine. One of them being if you're allergic to the MMR vaccine. But if you have a weakened immune system, you should not get the MMR vaccine. Well, the mom brings her sick child into the hospital who has breathing issues, right? RSV, pneumonia. They're struggling to breathe. They're coming to the hospital because something is wrong. And the hospital is oh, you're not vaccinated for MMR. We're going to go ahead and vaccinate you. I don't know if they asked the parent permission before they did this. I would hope so, but I don't know. I know that they gave this child the vaccine, then the child died. Whether it was from the vaccine or just from the complications of the breathing issues they were already having, that's also unclear. But when they died, the death was ruled a measles death. Well, it's a measles-related death because you just gave them a live vaccine. So if you're going to test them now, they're going to test positive for measles. They actively have measles in their body because you just gave it to them in a vaccine form. How is this any different than COVID when everything, a car accident, oh, they had COVID. Heart attack, oh, they had COVID. Like during COVID, especially like the beginning year, any death was related to COVID, right? Well, in this situation, this mom was like, my kid didn't have the measles. Like they were sick. They had pneumonia. They had RSV. They didn't have measles. But now they're calling it a measles-related death because the vaccine was given to the child. In many of the articles that I read about this, they specified that both children that died were unvaccinated. And they said, well, if you're vaccinated, then you probably wouldn't get the measles. Well, when you're doing the research, they say that sometimes the vaccine doesn't stick. So you could be vaccinated and still get the measles and still potentially die from it. But I'm wondering if this outbreak is kind of like scaring people into vaccinating potentially, because I feel like there's this vaccination war happening right now. Like we see this with COVID, and I think that after COVID and with the vaccine, there became a line of people that are like, I'm not vaccinating now because I'm pretty nervous about it. And other people are like, oh, I'm still going to vaccinate, not a problem. But because there's like a more definitive, like, hey, I'm pretty nervous about vaccines now, which happened because of COVID, I think that there's this almost like this war going on between the vaxxers and the anti-vaxxers. Big Pharma is trying to push. They're like, hey, you should vaccinate your children. So that makes me start to question, like, where did these measles pop up from? Because measles aren't very prevalent here in the US anymore. So like all of a sudden we got measles from somewhere. Where did the first case come from? Which I don't have the information for. But also, is this a ploy to get those anti-vaxxers or those non-vaxxers? I don't think everybody's anti-vax. I think that they're nervous. They're scared of the vaccines. I think this is a very big conversation happening in the US right now, that we are scared of vaccines. So now you're like making them scared that their child's going to die because of measles, when complications don't happen in every single case. I understand that complications can happen, but complications can happen with anything at any time. But you have people questioning vaccines and their efficacy. So again, was this outbreak planned to prove a point or to scare parents into getting their kids vaccinated? And why are they pushing vaccines so hard? Like, that's another question that we need to start questioning. And why isn't it more of a choice? Why can't the parents ask intelligent questions? Why can't we be told what's in the vaccines? Like, you have to look it up and then like really search for it. And I really searched for it. But instead, the doctors, the schools, the public, people are going to judge you for questioning the mainstream. But we should be allowed to question things that aren't normal or that we are nervous about. I'm nervous about this vaccine. Can you give me more information on it? I don't want to hear that it's 99.9% effective. Where does it come from? What's inside of it? Why do I need it? How prevalent is this disease in the area in which I live? But we're not allowed to ask those questions. Speaking of questions we're not allowed to ask, why was another CEO killed in a helicopter crash? Why? What's happening to these CEOs? Not just CEOs, Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash too. On April 10th, a sightseeing helicopter operated by New York Helicopter Charter Incorporated crashed into the Hudson River, killing 6 people. On board was Augustine Escobar, his wife Mercedes, and their 3 children, Victor, the youngest, Mercedes, their middle child, and Augustine, I'm assuming Jr. Augustine Sr. was the CEO of rail infrastructure at Siemens Mobility. The pilot was Sean Johnson, a U.S. Navy veteran who received his commercial pilot's license in 2023. Following this incident, the operations director agreed to suspend flights during the investigation, which he was asked about by the FAA. He was like, yeah, no problem. And then 16 minutes later, after the operations director agreed to ceasing operations for a little while as they investigate what's happening, the CEO came out and was like, whoa, get out of here. I did not authorize this halt. You will not be stopping operations here. And he fired the operations director. The federal aviation regulators got involved and issued an emergency order grounding the helicopter company because they're like, you need to chill out. Like, what if you guys are doing something wrong? And that's actually, I'm wondering if the CEO is trying to cover some things up. They say that the crash was due to mechanical failure, like the main rotor blade and head and the tail rotor blade came off the aircraft. The propellers came off the helicopter. That's one hell of a failure. Are you kidding me? The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Jersey City's Office of Emergency Management recovered and secured the main rotor system and the tail rotor system, which they need for this investigation. There are a couple weird things that have come out in the days following this crash, and I'm sure as time goes on, more things will come out about the crash and about like what's happening. But firstly, after takeoff, the pilot radioed saying that he was low on fuel and needed to come back and get more fuel, which is weird. That's part of your checklist before you take off. And you would think, if you're going to do this tour, and I'm assuming it's probably a pretty expensive tour being in New York, that you're going to check to make sure you have enough fuel in your helicopter before you take off. Siemens was boosting U.S. investment by $10 billion for American manufacturing jobs, software, and AI infrastructure. And BlackRock was involved. Imagine that. They increased their stake in Siemens Energy to 5.36%. But isn't it weird that all these CEOs that have died under strange circumstances were in business with BlackRock? Which kind of makes you wonder if these CEOs weren't complying with what BlackRock wanted, so that's why they were taken out. Not only that, but Siemens was just found guilty of wire fraud against GE and Mitsubishi. They also pled guilty to stealing confidential competitor information and had to pay $104 million late last year. And in 2020, they got sued by Mississippi City for $89 million over water meter mismanagement. And all these things really make you think about what Augustine knew or what he was ready to tell the world about. Was he going to give away all of Siemens' secrets? Why did they get rid of this guy? I don't know. We're going to keep an eye on that one because there's something weird happening there. I mean, there's something weird happening everywhere, right? But of course, until next week, my friends, stay skeptical, and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.